So yes, the G8, the G20, I welcome these as things that happen in the world because they provide a locus and a focal point for conversation and talk and dialogue. But I don't know how to evaluate what difference I think they're actually going to make to what happens. Because I've never been of the school which is persuaded that the other international institutions really shape very well what happened. One of the interesting debates in the current crisis is what was the role of international institutions in shaping what happened. It seems to me that international institutions in a lot of ways failed. That the crisis happened because everybody's known, as you say, people have known these problems for a very long time. For how many years have you been reading about that the imbalance between China and the United States was very unstable? That the Chinese currency was too high, that they had their savings rate was too high, they were exporting too many products, and the United States was the opposite. People have been talking that for a long time, but nobody has done anything. No international institution was able to get the United States or the Chinese to change their behavior. It has taken a gigantic, tremendous crisis for them to actually have to pay the cost of doing it. I think the European situation is extremely interesting. In what do we think of is the EU the solver of the problems of Greece, Turkey, and the Southern Cone? Is it the cause of it? Is it really is forcing Greece to go into a level of the euro that it can't possibly sustain, really a plausible thing? Is that what happened, or is the EU a structure whereby which German politicians could persuade their populations to pay for the bailout that they absolutely need in order to sustain a trading zone that they dominate? So I find it hard to evaluate. People talk about that the international institutions really help solve or stop this crisis from getting worse. I don't see that it did that. It was, that they got together, they talked on the telephone is fine, but I think that each country pursues its interests in this regard. And I'm very exalted. The long-winded answer to your question is, I think the challenge of international institutions, should Brazil have a seat in the UN? Those are really kind of analytically interesting, but I've always been very reluctant to believe that the international institutions solve the problems. So that the rise of the G20, to me, would be a very interesting symptom of the growing importance of these countries in the world economy. Right? Brazil, Turkey, China, these are really important. That fact is very interesting. That is going to change the politics of international rules. The G20 will be a vehicle for the articulation of it, but that's a long way from saying that the G20 will actually be a major causal force in what actually happens. That I don't know.
We have two more questions. You and there's another one there. Yes.
Hi, I'm Jerry McDermott, and a question about your argument and its future for political science. So, in a way, what you were nicely laid out was, let's just call them the structuralist and the pluralist views of how to understand the crisis, really political economy and comparative analysis of economic institutions, right? One could argue, however, as interesting that is, unfortunately, to take a really harsh view, it's not just the economists and it's not just finance professors, but indeed political science is moving in a direction that makes them unable to actually analyze any of this in the way that you're talking about. Do you think that, and I just bring up a quick example. We went through a massive collapse in East Europe, which we did do some research. And what happened? Political science ceded all the economics and the design of economic regulation right to the economists. Okay, so and in fact, our dear friends of Brazil, political scientists wrote arguments about markets and politics, but assuming essentially all the things that you were criticizing. And it's not clear to me the way political science is going that they're not going to do that again.
So my answer to that is that people continue to do one of the many interesting books we want to write about all this, which I'm not going to do, but it would be an interesting book, is to look at the way the crisis affected various disciplines. What is sociology doing, political science, anthropology, economics, finance, and different branches of this. And And I think it's quite interesting, and my pessimistic view is that it's not severe enough yet. It might take world wars and a Holocaust to get people to actually start absorbing it, because in a way it's not been severe enough. It is dismissible, the crisis is dismissible as something like the crisis of 1907, the financial panic of 1907, which a lot of people are looking at because it was, in the US terms, that was what finally led to the creation of the Federal Reserve. Because the panic of 1907 is the famous story when J.P. Morgan called all the bankers to his house and said, you each have to come up with enough money to stabilize the banks in trouble, and lock the door so they couldn't leave his house until they came up with the money. Well, after that happened, the Americans finally decided it's time to have a central bank that could do these things, which is the Federal Reserve. But notice that politically, the conservatives in the United States are attacking the Federal Reserve all the time anyway. So I don't think that so it's possible that this won't be severe enough to get people to change, because my observation is that people in the disciplines are quite capable of going on with what they've been doing, and that events by themselves don't necessarily force it. So that's one of the things that I'm hoping for, in a way, I would turn to as social science grows around the world, which as prosperity rises, you have more universities, you have more PhDs, you have more people, and I think the changes are going to come from someplace else. I don't think that the disciplines in the US, at any rate, the ones that you and I interact with the most, are likely to know themselves. I don't see enormous changes in political science in America happening to East Europe. I mean, East Europe wasn't a big enough event for them to change. Pessimistic as that is for you, since you were working on Eastern Europe, I don't think it forced them to change. The question is whether the shakeup in the United States will cause them to change and reflect. I am fascinated by how many questions I see economists asking. When Robert Solow, Nobel Prize-winning economist from MIT, starts writing papers, take the Daedalus of the specialist of the American magazine Daedalus had a special issue this past fall, of which there were quite a lot of articles by some very prominent economists and economic historians, and there was a lot of questioning in there. There wasn't hardly any political science in it, but there was a lot of questioning going on in there, and I'm curious to see where that will all go. When they start writing articles saying maybe financial innovation isn't everything, and when they start saying there really is such a thing as the real economy and start to articulate that, I think that's an interesting change.
Okay, there is a last question. That's the last.
Hello. Yes, first of all, thank you. Thank you very much. My question is related to the categories you mentioned before. You were saying some of them are falling, some of them are changing, some of them are being reshaped. What is the role of the media in the new environment? Is the media prepared to kind of help people to be educated in the transition? So the media is getting more and more attention. When you watch CNN and Fox News in the United States, we see that they have clearly a political agenda. But the question is, are they moving us forward?
Well, in that regard, the United States, again, is starting to resemble everybody else. The Americans are the only ones who really pretend, and have for years, that the media was neutral. Nobody pretended that in other places, that everybody understood that media has a point of view. And so I'm hoping that, much as I hate some of these news programs, I see that the realization that journalists have an agenda is probably a healthy thing, because then people will think about what is the agenda of the person that I'm watching. So I'm not sure that having an agenda and then that's blaming the media for something else, is Fox News to blame for the agenda of the people who love it?